Is Conner Weigman a top half quarterback in the SEC?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about Aggie quarterback Conner Weigman. I was reading an article today where Weigman was listed as the 8th best quarterback in the SEC, and that made me want to do a little bit of digging to see where he stands in the SEC compared to some other guys in the conference. So this list had the quarterbacks ranked in this way: Will Rogers, Devin Leary, Jaden Daniels, KJ Jefferson, Spencer Rattler, Joe Milton, Spencer Sanders, although I believe Dart's going to be the starting quarterback at Ole Miss, but we'll have to see how that plays out. Weigman at 8, Peyton Thorne, AJ Swan, Tyler Buckner, Graham Mertz, Carson Beck, and Brady Cook. My pushback to this is that a lot of these guys are unproven. Now, you can argue, well, Weigman's unproven. That is true, but you have to remember about Weigman. He did start 5 games last season, and he put up some pretty good numbers, except for one game. And that's one thing I found about Weigman last season that I think many people kind of misinterpreted. He was impressive. Coming in as a true freshman, it's not often that a true freshman quarterback starts right away at an SEC school. Even a guy like Weigman, who was the number 22 player in the class of the 2022 and the 3rd best quarterback in the class. Not a lot of guys are going to come in and just start right off the bat. Boom, here I am, I'm starting. But Weigman, of course, worked his way into that role at the end of the season. And so let's take a look at some of his numbers, and let's break down how Weigman looked last year and how he can take a step forward this year. So last year, his first game he played against South Carolina, Weigman was 8 for 15, 91 yards, no touchdowns. Against Ole Miss, Weigman had a monster game. 28 for 44, 338 yards, 4 touchdowns. Now, here comes the game where Weigman was a little bit rough. Against Auburn, that tough loss where the Aggies couldn't put up any points against a really bad Auburn team and dropped a game that Texas A&M just shouldn't have, which inevitably led to the Aggies struggling to not being able to get bowl eligible. So that Auburn game, Weigman was 14 for 36 for 121 yards and 1 touchdown. That whole game, the offense looked stagnant. They couldn't move the football. It was not a great performance from Weigman, but still, this is funny. I always joke about Weigman's touchdown pass in that game. I always call it like a comebacker in golf. We all know you get on the golf course, you had a rough day, and then on the 18th tee box, you smoke one down the middle, and you go, okay, I guess I'm going to have to play tomorrow. That's what that touchdown that Weigman threw in that Auburn game was for me last season. I said, this young man's got it in him. He's got to develop. He's got to turn it around. But Conner Weigman is going to be a really elite quarterback in this conference. And that's what I learned from him last season. Now, 2 more games for you. Massachusetts, 11 for 19, 191 yards, 1 touchdown. And then the awesome big-time W over LSU last season. Weigman was 12 for 18 for 155 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. I think the reason that I believe Weigman is going to be a potential top 5, top 7, I'll get into where I think he sits in the conference soon. But the reason I believe that he falls in that range is because he's such a versatile quarterback. He can run the football, which I love to see. It's not he's known more as an arm strength, arm talent, put some balls right where they need to be kind of quarterback, but he can run the football. And that was one thing I took away from the spring game, actually, was there were some holes for him that had they let the quarterbacks run it out, he would have picked up some big gains. But I think what's so exciting about Weigman is look at some of these games like I just read off. Like a great example is that LSU win. 12 for 18, 155 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's almost like a game manager kind of game, in my opinion. Weigman wasn't asked to throw the ball 36 times like he did against Auburn or 44 times like he did against Ole Miss. Of course, in 2 games that the Aggies lost. He was asked, throw the ball 18 times move the ball down the field, and score some touchdowns. That's what Weigman did, led to a big win over the team that inevitably went to the SEC championship from the western side of the SEC. So Weigman has an upside that is untapped, untouched, and I think we could see on display this year because, and that's the point I'm going to keep harping on, he was a true freshman last year. He was a young buck right out of high school. He had just gotten done with his last prom, and now he's playing football for the Aggies. That's a tough ask for a young man to go and quarterback an SEC team. Now, we've seen it happen, and we've seen guys succeed. But the argument is Weigman is going to develop. We've already seen it. He made some throws in the spring game that just got me giddy. Just seeing him put some balls right on target to some of these elite wideouts, these great pass catchers that Weigman is gifted with. He made some great throws. He's going to continue to make great throws, and he's going to develop into a great quarterback in this league. You just got to give him time. But now, like I say, I already read the list off to you of the quarterbacks that Weigman is going to compete with for, ranking position-wise in the Southeastern Conference. So let's do some pushback. They have him at 8th. On this list, they have the grouping above him of Sanders, Jackson Dart, and Will Howard. I've seen Dart play. I've seen Sanders play. I don't know how you can sit here and rank those two above him. Sanders has won football games at the Power 5 level. So is Jackson Dart. But I think the upside here is untapped. And now this is another thing. In 5 weeks into the season, it could be a conversation we have again, and one of those guys comes out and runs Lane Kiffin's offense really well and looks better than Weigman. Completely a possibility. But right now, if I'm a coach at a school and I can pick a player and you say you can have Will Howard, Jackson Dart, Spencer Sanders, or Conner Weigman, I'm taking Conner Weigman, and I think many would agree on that because he's young. He's got multiple years left quarterback in the Aggies unless the NFL comes calling after these next 2 seasons. He'll be quarterback in the Aggies for at least 2 more years, and he's a former 5-star player that showed flashes last season of elite ability on the football field. Then you move above him. Joe Milton, this is a tough one because Joe Milton's almost in the same kind of picture as Weigman in the fact that he showed signs as well last year. That one is one of those, I'd put them right next to one another on a rankings list because I could see that going either way. I could see both of these guys breaking out and being elite quarterbacks in the SEC. So I get why you might want to have Milton above Weigman. But the thing about Weigman is he has elite pass catchers. The talent around him is so exciting. He's going to elevate the talent around him this year. He's going to make passes. And he's going to be another thing that's going to boost him in these rankings is the new offensive coordinator. We're going to get more into Bobby Petrino here a little bit later in this episode, but Petrino's done it. He's been there, done that. He has coached at this level and won at this level. So we're going to talk more about Petrino, so I'll leave that for a little bit. But that gives you a boost right there if you're Conner Weigman. And then Spencer Rattler and KJ Jefferson. Spencer Rattler, this is something I bet I'm going to get a lot of pushback on. But he is just so inconsistent. I said this on yesterday's show. Spencer Rattler's a guy that I always joke and say he can come out and throw for 532 yards and 5 touchdowns and just blow your team out of the water. Or he's going to come out and just have a rough game where he throws a whole bunch of interceptions. So Rattler, once again, I'm taking Weigman over Rattler. A lot of people are going to disagree, but I just think the upside in Weigman is the ceiling is higher. You could say the floor for Rattler is higher. I agree that's a fair take, but I think the ceiling for Weigman is out of this world. KJ Jefferson, I think, is a better quarterback than Weigman right now. But KJ Jefferson, he's hurt a lot. We've had years to be impressed with him, and he shows flashes. But at his point in time, quarterbacking in the SEC, it shouldn't be flashes anymore. It should be elite dominance, and we've seen it at times, but it's just not consistent. So Jefferson, I agree with this list having Jefferson above Weigman. But I think that this is something that if Weigman breaks out, like many in the media believe he could do, that Weigman could overtake Jefferson in these rankings. And then the rest of these guys, Will Rogers, I'm really high on. I think he's going to have a great year. He's a great quarterback. Devin Leary at Kentucky's at 2. Devin Leary's a great quarterback too. It's going to be interesting to see how that system works with him quarterbacking. UK got the offensive coordinator back. Liam Cohen is his name. That he was at UK, Will Levis's first year on campus. And then he took the offensive coordinator job with the Rams. That didn't go well, so he's back in Kentucky. And of course, Cohen is the guy who turned Will Levis into a star, and Will Levis was, of course, an early second-round pick in this NFL draft. So I think Leary's going to have a big year. I wouldn't put Weigman above Leary. But the point of all of this that I spoke to a little bit earlier is Weigman's upside is a top 5 quarterback in the SEC. And if you disagree, look at some of these guys that are ranked in the top 5 on this list. Will Rogers, Devin Leary, Jaden Daniels, KJ Jefferson, Spencer Rattler. There are 3 guys on that list that I think are definitely better than Weigman and will probably end the season better than him. And that would be Will Rogers, Devin Leary, and Jaden Daniels. But Rattler and Jefferson, like I said, if I was a betting man, I would expect those 2 to have a bit of a better season than Weigman. But I think it's within the realm of possibility for Weigman to outplay these guys because of the raw talent. He has so much raw talent, and it's going to be on display this season, and I think he's going to break out. And the thing to remember about Weigman compared to a lot of these guys is the players he has around him. He has elite receivers. Not a lot of these guys have that. So the exciting part for Weigman is it's not all on him. He's going to have guys to throw the ball to. Not everyone on this list does. And that's another reason I think he could take a boost higher in these rankings down the road. And then my last thought on Weigman that is going to be interesting is for Texas A&M to have a good season, he doesn't have to be a top 5 guy in the SEC. Weigman can come out with the defense last year for the Aggies was great. I expect it to be great again this season. Not concerned about that. So the point is, if Weigman with this run game can just be a game manager, like in that LSU game, I think that LSU game is a great example of what we need out of him this year. If Weigman can just give you over 55 to 60 completion percentage, a couple of touchdowns, over 180 yards a game, this team's going to win a lot of football games. Now, you'd love for him to have a few games where he's 36 for 47 for 432 yards and 4 touchdowns, and that's going to happen some. But it's just going to be really exciting to see Weigman back out on the field this year and see what he has in him, because I think a breakout's coming, and I'm really excited to see how that plays out for him and the Aggies this season. What's Bobby Petrino going to look like as the offensive coordinator for the Aggies? We'll talk about that here in a minute, but first, let's talk about our friends over at Built Bar. Built Bar is the best protein bar in the world. 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, and they're pumped full of 17 grams of protein. The protein is what's so key in that is you want to have a quick snack that's going to fill you up. Built Bar is going to do that for you. I'm always a believer that protein bars, they're small. They're not a snack on the go. That's not the case with Built Bar. You eat one of these and you are filled up with good stuff, chocolate, protein, great protein bars. You should go give them a shot. They're keto friendly. I'm doing a keto diet, so they've been a big thing to helping me out. I'm down about 13 pounds now. You can find these Built Bars at built.com, of course, their website, and at Sam's Club and Walmart. So go give them a shout, and I will, and you all can thank me later for this recommendation here. So Bobby Petrino is the new offensive coordinator for the Aggies, and that has been a really big talking point around college football for about 4, 5, 6 months now. People saying, what's this going to look like? Is Jimbo going to loosen up on the reins? How's this going to look? So to me, my first thought on Petrino is, of course, there's been some stuff in the past. We know all that. But when it comes to just being a football coach, he is a heck of an offensive mind. He knows what he's doing. He's done it with different styles of quarterback. He's put a lot of quarterbacks to the next level, but once again, that's why we have this talk about Weigman like we just did a minute ago. I think that Petrino is going to elevate him. But let's look at some of Petrino's career accomplishments and different players he's coached, X, Y, and Z. So Petrino he's been at multiple schools, but I'm just going to highlight some of the main places. He was at WKU for a year or so. He was at Louisville for a while. He was at Arkansas for a while. And then he was the head coach of the Falcons for 1 year. We'll talk about that year. There was some interesting facts, which is actually a fun fact that I wasn't aware of. He was the Jaguars OC for a while, and he was the OC over at Auburn for a year or so. He's coached Lamar Jackson at Louisville and Ryan Mallett, which those are some big-name quarterbacks. I mean, of course, Lamar Jackson just signed a mega deal for lots of money to to be a Baltimore Raven for longer. And so but what's interesting is that he can coach different styles of quarterback. A lot of coaches, they have their ways. They have their quarterbacks they like. I want a pocket passer. I want a guy who can run the RPO. I want a guy who can just run the football, flat out run the football and do it at a high level. Petrino is exceptional in the way that he can build an offense around the players that he has. And that's what I'm really looking forward to see with Weigman. Petrino is going to build an offense for Conner Weigman, for him to succeed in with these elite pass catchers in this elite running back room and a lot of the different variables there. He's going to make this offense flow well. I'm not worried about Petrino's play calling. What I'm worried about in this situation, which is what many are concerned about and many are questioning, is how's this dynamic going to work with Coach Fisher, the former, obviously, play caller and head coach. Coach Fisher has been calling his own plays for a long time. People are starting to figure it out. We see this happen in the SEC. We see this happen all over college football. A coach has their offense. They run it forever and ever and ever. People get wise to it. That's what's kind of happened with Jimbo. He used to – I always think this is kind of funny. I read this somewhere that Jimbo's playbook is like the menu at Cheesecake Factory. I mean, that thing, if you pick that thing up, you don't have to hit arms in the gym for a week because it's about 400 pounds. That's how Jimbo's playbook is. It's deep. And the thing about his playbook is it hasn't worked well lately. It hasn't panned out. There's been some different variables that have led to this, but at the end of the day, as a coach, you got to fight through those variables. And Jimbo last year was a great example. He wasn't able to do that. He brings in Petrino, incredible offensive mind. Can't stress that enough. And Petrino is going to be a guy who's going to come in. I think he's going to fix this offense. I think he's going to help get the best out of Conner Weigman. And that is one of the reasons why I'm so high on Weigman this season. He has an offensive mind around him that is going to help him dominate this conference. The only thing that this has been the talking point around the conference is, will Jimbo, let's say opening game of the season, Jimbo doesn't like something Petrino calls. I'm sure they're going to communicate between each other, and I'm sure Jimbo's still going to have some input on the offense. But let's say Coach Petrino calls something, and Jimbo's kind of like, I don't like that here. I don't like that on 3rd and 2. I don't like that on 2nd and 12. I want to run something different. What's he going to do? Is that going to cause conflict? Is that going to cause some kind of sideshow act for the season? The Aggies don't want to see that happen. So you have to hope this dynamic between these two prolific coaches works out well. And I foresee that happening. I think this is going to be a great dynamic, and I think this is going to put Texas A&M back in a spot that they want to be, especially after a drastically horrible into last year's season, going 5-7 with that team. So I think this was a home run hire. Many people have been on the fence about it. I think it's a great hire, and I'm really excited to see how Coach Petrino does his first year coaching the offense down in College Station. So let's talk a little bit about A&M baseball. That's right. It's a big weekend for the Texas A&M Aggies baseball team. It's been a disappointing season. There's no debate to it, but that's part of playing in the SEC. In any sport, baseball, basketball, football, it's a gauntlet. It's going to be a gauntlet when you get into conference play every single time. And Texas A&M started as a team many thought were going to go to Omaha again this year. Of course, they went last year. Many thought this team was going to be amazing. Multiple variables just didn't pan out. A lot of times when you see stuff like this happen, there's lots of injuries. You lose 2 starting pitchers. You lose your center fielder, X, Y, and Z. A&M hasn't had a ton of injuries. It's just been they haven't been great. But you look at the record, 30-22 on the year. They won their series against Florida 2 weekends ago, which had me thinking this team's going to make a run to potentially be a 2, definitely a 3, maybe a 2 seed in the regional. Then last weekend, lose a series at home against Alabama. That series was killer. Alabama's not a bad baseball team, but losing that series at home, it hurts. That's killer. And so in SEC baseball, we always talk about it as a magic number. Any of you professional baseball fans out there, you all know what a magic number is. And we talk about the 14 win mark being the magic number for SEC. They always put these graphics when you watch the ball games of the different statistics and the different numbers and what they mean. In SEC baseball, if you win 14 games in conference, your chances of making the postseason are very, very high. In essence, if you win 14 games in the SEC, you are going to make the postseason. Right now, 12-15, with 1 series remaining against Mississippi State. Meaning you have to win that series. The Aggies are going to have to hit the road and head down to Mississippi to play 2 years ago's national champion. Mississippi State's not a great ball club, but they're coming off the highest of highs as they just knocked off LSU at their home field, beating them 2-1 in the series there at the box. So they're on a high. Now, sometimes we've seen in all sports, the team comes off they're on a high and they're going to come off it and crash hard in a major way. That could be the case with Mississippi State, and if as an Aggie fan, that's what you got to hope for. But Texas A&M is going to be hitting the road, heading down to Mississippi, hoping to take 2 of 3 and lock themselves in as a tournament team. The thing about SEC baseball, and I am a big believer in this, once SEC teams get out of conference play and get into their regionals, spread across the world, spread across the United States, wherever they're going to play in a regional, SEC teams dominate. Look at the flag behind me. Let's count this. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 8 teams in the College World Series. 4 of them last year were SEC teams, with your Texas A&M Aggies being one of them. This is what happens every year. The SEC dominates in the postseason because it's a gauntlet. They're used to playing other SEC teams. Then you get out, you play an ACC team, you play a Big Ten team, you play one of these Group of 5 schools that has a good baseball program, and the SEC wins more than they lose because they've played 30 games against the best teams in the conference. I think that's in store for the Aggies if they can get past Mississippi State this weekend. And then, of course, stuff can go right at the SEC tournament down there in Alabama. So there's lots of different ways that the Aggies can make this work. But you would love to just take 2 or 3 this weekend and secure yourself, or a sweep, and for sure secure yourself a spot in the postseason. This baseball team, it's not been great, but like I said, the point I'm trying to push home is that if they can just get to the postseason, they can make this work. They can beat a team that had a good regular season and in their regional, go to their place, knock them off, and move into a super. It can happen. If you are, as an SEC team, if you can just get out of the SEC, if you can just get into the field of 64, you always have a chance. So I think that could be in store for the Aggies, but it all starts this weekend with a big, big, big series going on in Starkville, Mississippi. So you got to hope that Texas A&M is able to pull out the big victory. If they're able to do that, they're going to be dancing into the postseason of college baseball and looking to potentially make another run to Omaha. That'd be a ton of fun. It would take a lot from this team, but once again, when SEC teams get out of the SEC, anything is possible. And that is soon to be possible for the Aggies if they're able to take care of their business against Mississippi State. That's going to do it for us today. We will see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Aggies.